Usually when we talk about like a medical diagnosis, there's this expectation of pure, unfiltered precision.
Right, like engineering or something.
Exactly. Like you break your arm, the x-ray shows that jagged white line on the glowing screen, and the doctor just, points and says, there it is.
It's totally binary. Broken or not broken. I mean, we find a tremendous amount of comfort in that kind of visual categorization. We really want our problems to be things we can physically point at.
Yeah, we really do. But then, you step into the world of human emotion or modern culture
Hmm.
or honestly just meaning itself. And suddenly that x-ray machine is just spitting out static.
Utter static.
And we're looking at a diagnostic landscape that is just entirely murky. So today, for this deep dive, we are exploring a highly experimental, completely unprecedented text. It's titled Opalite, Baudrillard meets Taylor Swift.
Which is quite the title.
It really is.
Hmm.
And the core premise of this book is guaranteed to make, a certain type of intellectual immediately cross their arms and lean back in their chair.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the author, who publishes anonymously under the pseudonym Mouse-Colored Cat, has essentially written a text that defies every single academic boundary.
Yeah, they describe it as part revision guide, part blind date, and part rebellious classroom experiment.
Which is such a cool way to frame it. And the fundamental question they pose is basically this: what if the questions compressed into a 3.5-minute pop song are the exact same questions that have haunted philosophers for centuries?
I was reading that premise, and it just hit me that the author isn't saying pop music is like a watered-down version of philosophy.
Not at all.
They are arguing that the only real difference between a stadium pop anthem and a dense, leather-bound philosophical treatise isn't actually intellectual depth. It's just permission.
Yes. That concept of permission is the radical engine driving this whole thing. I mean, the text isn't trying to explain Taylor Swift using philosophy to make her seem smarter, nor is it trying to dumb down philosophy using pop music to make it palatable. It simply seats them at the exact same table without asking the academic gatekeepers for an invitation.
It just waits to see who spills their secrets first.
Exactly.
Let's actually talk about those gatekeepers for a second, because if you mention a massive pop star and a dense French philosopher in the same breath at, like, a cocktail party, you're going to get a very specific reaction.
Oh, the smirk.
Yes, the smirk. It's this condescending, heavy-lidded eye roll. And the author tackles that smirk right on the first page, which I loved, by bringing in the French sociologist Pierre Bourdieu.
Bourdieu is honestly the perfect starting point for dismantling that smirk. He wrote this landmark piece of sociological literature back in 1979 called Distinction.
Right.
And his argument, which the text leverages brilliantly, is that the line we draw between high culture, the art and philosophy deemed worthy of serious contemplation, and low culture, which gets dismissed as just disposable entertainment, that line has almost nothing to do with objective intellectual depth.
So if it's not about the actual complexity of the ideas, what is it about?
Yeah.
Because, we're all raised to believe that reading Dostoevsky is objectively better for your brain than listening to the radio. Bourdieu says that's just a myth.
He argues it is primarily a mechanism for social sorting.
Okay, social sorting.
Yeah, Bourdieu introduced this concept of cultural capital. Just like economic capital, meaning having a lot of money gives you power, and cultural capital gives you power and status.
So it's like knowing which wine to order or understanding obscure references.
Exactly. Navigating dense academic texts. It's a way for the elite classes to establish and defend their social status against the masses.
I love this because it exposes the whole system. High culture circulates with this protective armor of credentials and university syllabi and exclusivity.
Right, whereas low culture circulates with Spotify playlists and universal accessibility.
And that universal accessibility is exactly why the elite treat pop culture with such deep suspicion.
Precisely. If a stadium of 70,000 people is singing it, it completely loses its scarcity. If everyone gets it, it cannot be used as a tool to elevate anyone above the crowd.
It loses its VIP status.
Exactly. The complexity of the pop song is totally irrelevant at that point. Its mass appeal is what invalidates it in the eyes of the cultural elite.
Here is where it gets really interesting for me. Think about it like a restaurant. Are we judging a restaurant purely by its strict, esoteric dress code instead of the actual quality of the food on the plate?
That's a great analogy.
Because we just automatically assume the food must be Michelin star quality simply because they force you to wear a tuxedo and know a secret password to get in the door.
Right.
And conversely, we assume a street vendor's food must be simplistic, even if the flavor profile is incredibly complex, simply because any teenager with $5 can walk up and buy a taco.
The dress code of academic philosophy is dense jargon, endless footnotes, and institutional gatekeeping. If you strip all of that away, the elite lose their mechanism of distinction.
Which is terrifying for them.
Very. The text argues that the questions Swift raises in her music questions of identity, the terrifying nature of freedom, the unreliability of memory, are the exact same preoccupations of thinkers like Rousseau, Hannah Arendt, Nietzsche.
She just happens to ask them in 3 minutes wearing sequins without asking for academic permission.
Exactly.
The author makes this incredible point that translating a philosopher into a few lucid pages is not simplification, but fidelity.
Yes.
I want to linger on that because the academic instinct is to say that if you summarize Kant or Nietzsche, you are flattening them. You're destroying the nuance.
Right. But this author claims that to simplify is to flatten, but to translate is to risk. And risk, unlike prestige, is democratic.
It forces us to ask what the actual purpose of philosophy even is.
Exactly. By suggesting that risk is democratic, the author is arguing that putting these monumental ideas into the public square, where they might be misunderstood or, remixed by teenagers, is actually a truer fidelity to the spirit of philosophy.
Far more than keeping them perfectly preserved and sterile in a university vault.
Right. Keeping them locked up is just intellectual hoarding. It doesn't actually serve the human condition.
And having completely dismantled that initial snobbery, the author takes this massive democratic risk with something so incredibly bold. They write an apocryphal foreword.
Yeah.
It's an entirely imaginary letter written from the perspective of Taylor.
It is a beautifully crafted, highly speculative piece of fiction. The letter is time-stamped at 2 a.m., and the author describes it as being written somewhere between noise and silence.
Wow.
And this imaginary Taylor is reflecting on a life spent basically trying to capture lightning in a bottle. She talks about how her intense, overwhelming emotions were constantly policed by the media.
Told they were too much.
Exactly. Too much, too loud, too inherently feminine.
We see that all the time.
Yeah.
Teenage girls in particular are so easily dismissed as melodramatic. Society acts as if adolescence isn't the exact moment when you feel the weight of the world with the absolute violence of a summer storm.
Perfectly said.
But then this imaginary Taylor pivots away from that media narrative. She starts wondering if the questions keeping her up at night are actually profound philosophical inquiries masquerading as heartbreak.
Yes. She asks this amazing question. Why does the memory of a scarf left in a drawer weigh more heavily than an entire decade?
Such a great line.
She also asks, are we defined by those who love us or by those who leave? I mean, these aren't just lyrics about a breakup.
No, they're not.
They are fundamental structural inquiries into memory, the fluidity of identity, and existential dread.
And the apocryphal foreword explores the profound comfort of realizing that your isolated 2 a.m. anxieties are actually part of a massive, ongoing human tradition.
Right. The text puts it so brilliantly. It says, it's as if the ghosts that haunt our hallways actually have university degrees.
Oh man, I felt that line in my chest.
Same.
Because you're sitting there thinking you are the only person who has ever felt this specific agonizing cocktail of regret and longing, and then you realize that you're just echoing a debate that started in ancient Greece.
Exactly. The imaginary Taylor wonders if, while writing a song about a boy with blue eyes, she was unknowingly debating Plato on the nature of illusion.
Plato's allegory of the cave is highly relevant there.
Yeah.
Like, are we falling in love with the reality of a person or just the shadows they cast on the wall of our own expectations?
Yes. And the imaginary Taylor also wonders if she was arguing with Jean-Paul Sartre about the gaze of others.
Let's actually break that down because Sartre's concept of the gaze is terrifyingly perfect for a massive celebrity or honestly just anyone navigating a high school hallway.
It really is. So Sartre argued in Being and Nothingness that when we are alone, we are the center of our universe. We are the subject.
Right.
But the moment another person enters the room and looks at us, we are suddenly reduced to an object in their universe.
Wow.
Their gaze strips us of our absolute freedom because we suddenly have to consider how they perceive us. We become alienated from ourselves. Hell is other people, as he famously wrote.
And for a pop star who is constantly perceived by millions, or just a teenager feeling the crushing weight of peer judgment, Sartre's philosophy isn't abstract. It's a daily, lived trauma.
Absolutely.
But I have to play devil's advocate for a second here.
Okay, go for it.
If we treat pop lyrics as portable metaphysics, Does it actually elevate the music, or are we just kind of tricking ourselves?
How do you mean?
Like, is this just a way to sneak dense philosophy into our brains, like hiding pureed spinach in a strawberry smoothie? Are we just trying to make ourselves feel smarter for listening to pop music?
It's a fair question, but the text anticipates that exact critique.
Oh, it does.
Yeah. The author argues that it's neither an artificial elevation of pop nor a dumbing down of philosophy. It's an alignment of shared human experience.
Raw emotion always comes first.
Exactly. You do not need to have read Sartre's Being and Nothingness to feel the crushing, paralyzing weight of someone else's judgment. The music captures the raw, lived experience of the philosophy.
So the philosophical text simply provides the structural vocabulary to fully understand the architecture of what you are already feeling.
That's exactly it.
And I have to say, the author sprinkles in some incredible humor to ground all of this heavy theory. My absolute favorite Easter egg in the text is just a throwaway line at the end of the fake foreword.
Oh, I know which one you're talking about.
It says, apparently Kant loved the bridge in Cruel Summer.
It's a wonderful moment of intellectual levity. I mean, Immanuel Kant is notorious for being one of the driest, most systematic, rules-obsessed philosophers in history.
Right, he's the architect of the categorical imperative, which basically states you must only act according to rules that you would want to become universal laws for everyone.
Right, so imagine Kant, this rigid 18th century Prussian thinker who supposedly took his daily walk at the exact same time every day so the townspeople could set their watches by him.
Which is so intense.
Very. Imagine him applying the categorical imperative to the lyrics of Cruel Summer.
I'm drunk in the back of the car, and I cried like a baby coming home from the bar.
Yes. Kant trying to determine if crying drunk in the back of a car can be willed into a universal moral law. The sheer absurdity of pairing his strict moral duty with unadulterated, chaotic pop passion is just hilarious.
It really forces you to see the philosopher as a human being capable of screaming a pop bridge.
Which perfectly transitions into the central figure of the text. The book eventually shifts its focus to the specific philosopher under the microscope for this volume.
Jean Baudrillard.
Jean Baudrillard.
Let's really get to know him, because he's not what you picture when you think of a wealthy, elite, French intellectual smoking a cigarette in a Parisian cafe.
Not at all. He was born in 1929 in Reims, France. And the text gives us crucial biographical context to show how his background actually shaped his entire worldview.
He came from a very modest working-class family.
Very modest. His parents were civil servants. His grandparents were peasant farmers. He was actually the first person in his entire family lineage to even attend university.
Which means he was completely outside that elite, high-culture echelon we were just talking about with Bourdieu. He didn't have the inherited cultural capital.
Exactly. He was an outsider looking in at the mechanisms of culture. He began his career not as a grand philosopher, but just teaching German in a provincial high school.
Wow.
He translated the works of the Marxist playwright Bertolt Brecht and, of course, Karl Marx himself. He was deeply steeped in Marxist economic theory before pivoting to sociology.
And the text notes the incredible irony of his legacy here, because today, he is the philosopher most enthusiastically cited by science fiction filming.
Oh, yeah, like the Wachowskis with The Matrix.
Right, and yet he is arguably the least understood by the very people who cite him.
It's true.
So how does a high school German teacher translating Marx become the godfather of sci-fi philosophy? Where does the big breakthrough happen?
It begins in 1968 with a book called The System of Objects. Baudrillard took traditional Marxist theory, which was obsessed with production, factories, and labor, and he totally flipped it.
Okay, how so?
He argued a revolutionary idea for the time. He said that in the modern world, we no longer consume things for their physical usefulness. We consume them for the symbolic language they represent.
Because Marx talked about use value and exchange value. Like, a coat is useful because it keeps you warm, and it has exchange value because you can trade it for 3 chickens or whatever.
Exactly.
But Baudrillard introduces something else entirely.
Yeah.
Sign value.
Yes. Sign value. A car is no longer about getting from point A to point B. It is a message broadcast to society.
So if I go out and buy a massive, lifted, gas-guzzling truck that has never seen a dirt road in its life,
Which we see all the time.
all the time, I am communicating a specific brand of rugged individualism and traditional masculinity.
Right.
And if I buy a sleek, silent, hyper-expensive electric vehicle, I am communicating forward-thinking, affluent environmentalism.
Exactly. The metal, the engine, the actual utility of the vehicle, those are entirely secondary. The object is just a word in a sentence. I am speaking about my identity.
It's just a code. Clothing isn't protection from the elements, it's a signifier. Like, the distressed jeans you buy for $300 aren't practical.
No, they're a signifier of effortless cool. Consumption is not an economic act for Baudrillard. It is a complex language of signs.
But he drops his real philosophical bomb over a decade later, right?
Yes, in his seminal 1981 work, Simulacra and Simulation. And this is the concept that the entire deep dive hinges on.
The theory of hyperreality. The idea that has basically broken my brain for the past week.
Welcome to the club.
The text points out that Baudrillard's thesis is constantly aggressively misunderstood. People assume he was a doomsday prophet, saying that physical reality was going to vanish overnight and we'd all live in computer tubes.
Right, but he wasn't saying reality disappears. He was saying reality becomes optional.
Optional.
Yes. Images, symbols, and signs no longer need to refer to something real in order to function perfectly well in our society.
He talked about the progression of the image, right? In the beginning, an image is a reflection of a profound reality, like a portrait of a king.
Sure.
Then, the image masks and perverts a profound reality.
Sure.
Then, it masks the absence of a profound reality.
And finally, it has no relation to any reality whatsoever. It is its own pure simulacrum.
Yes, the 4 successive phases of the image. By the time we reach the 4th stage, the map precedes the territory. The simulation generates a reality without origin or reality.
So what does this actually look like in your daily life?
Well, I was trying to wrap my head around this progression, and I immediately thought of social media, specifically the Instagram vacation.
Oh, that's a perfect example.
Right. Think about the mechanics of curating a perfect Instagram story of your trip to the beach. For you listeners right now, you spend 30 minutes posing, finding the right angle to hide the crowded parking lot behind you.
You apply a filter to make the sunset look more vibrant than it actually is.
Exactly. You spend another 20 minutes picking the perfect aesthetic background song.
And what happens to the actual physical experience of the trip?
It becomes completely secondary. The curated story, the simulation, actually becomes more real and infinitely more functional in your social life than the actual trip.
Yes, because your friends interact with the story, they envy the story, and months later, you look back at your own archive and you remember the story.
The stressful, mosquito-bitten, sunburned, financially draining reality of the actual trip is completely bypassed.
Totally bypass.
The copy didn't just replace the original experience, it optimized it.
That is hyperreality in its purest form.
Yeah.
As the text states, advertising doesn't just represent a product, it makes the product desirable.
Right.
Social networks don't just reflect your life, they construct a narrative that your actual reality then desperately tries to live up to. The copy doesn't have to be authentic, it only has to work.
And this is where the author of Opalite executes a brilliant conceptual leap. They take this massive, abstract, somewhat cynical sociological theory about consumer capitalism and media, and they apply it directly, surgically, to human connection.
Which brings us to the title of the book itself.
Opalite. It is the core metaphorical pairing of the entire text.
And it's crucial to understand what opalite actually is. An opalite is not a real, naturally occurring opal pulled from the earth.
Right, it's man-made.
Exactly. It is typically constructed from glass, synthetic resin, and traces of metal to give it that milky, iridescent glow.
But it's stunning. If you hold it up to the light, it catches the colors beautifully.
It really does. And the text calls it the jewel that shines without an original. It is a pure simulacrum of a gemstone.
And the author maps this synthetic, shining stone onto modern love. The text makes the devastating argument that love, today, frequently follows the exact logic of Baudrillard's hyperreality.
We do not necessarily fall in love with a malicious illusion. We fall in love with something that functions as love.
Yes, think about the mechanics of a modern relationship, especially in the early stages. We all know the scripts.
Oh, completely.
We know what a good morning text is supposed to look like. We know the exact cadence of a dinner date. We know how to perform vulnerability without actually risking anything.
The gestures align. The words fit the cinematic script we've all been raised on. The story holds together perfectly. The image of the relationship convinces us, and it convinces our friends.
I have to quote the text here because it delivers this incredibly poetic synthesis of this idea.
Go for it.
The image felt real enough to stay. We trusted what performed well. The pose came before the feeling. The screen replaced the moment. We loved what looked like love. No one asked what was missing. The copy held until it didn't. You saw it and everything changed.
We loved what looked like love. That is a terrifying heart of Baudrillard's theory applied to the human heart.
It really is.
It's not that your partner was an evil mastermind maliciously lying to you every day. It's that the relationship itself was just a highly functioning performance of a relationship. It checked all the boxes of the simulation.
It is a profound existential dread. The realization that you are exchanging perfectly calibrated signs of affection rather than actual affection.
Yeah.
But wait, I had to challenge this because I was arguing with the book in my head while reading this part.
Okay, let's hear it.
If a relationship functions perfectly as love, if it genuinely makes you happy on a Tuesday night, if the gestures align, if you feel supported when you're stressed, and the screen replaces the moment flawlessly, why do we even care if it's technically a performance?
Right.
At what point is the highly functioning copy just as good, or maybe even better, than the messy original? If the synthetic opalite shines just as bright and catches the light just as beautifully, why do we demand the imperfect stone pulled from the dirt?
That is the essential philosophical tension of our era, and it's exactly the debate the text stages next to answer your question.
Oh, the dinner party.
Yes. The author constructs a hypothetical scene titled The Dinner Conversation. It's designed to capture the exact tension between demanding painful authenticity and accepting a comfortable, functional simulacrum.
I love the structure of this part. It basically reads like a one-act play. It's a dialogue between three distinct archetypal voices sitting around a dinner table.
Right. You have a snob, a Swiftie, and a dense, jargon-heavy academic named Professor Malek Merriwell chiming in from the head of the table.
Let's break down their arguments because they represent the three ways we process hyperreality.
Let's start with snob.
Right. The snob takes the traditional, deeply cynical view. To the snob, comparing love to opalite is just a cheap metaphor for a fake relationship.
It's a lie from the beginning. It's pure nihilism to them. The snob essentially asks, so now we are just supposed to accept that illusion counts as love.
The snob wants things to be binary, real or fake, broken or not broken.
Exactly. But the Swiftie steps in to defend Baudrillard's actual theory, which is far more nuanced. The Swiftie says if it were just fake, it wouldn't have worked for so long.
Oh, that's such a good point.
Baudrillard doesn't say illusion replaces love in a malicious act of deception. He says the simulation can function as reality. That is precisely why you don't notice it at first. The relationship was coherent, the signs aligned. That is why it lasted for months or even years.
The snob assumes that if the relationship eventually ended, it must mean it was a lie from day one, that the person was always faking it.
But the Swiftie corrects them, pointing out that nothing about the physical mechanics of the relationship changed. Only the perception changed.
The Swiftie brings in the lyric, "You were just a pose."
Yes, the illusion didn't physically break, it just stopped convincing the observer.
It didn't break, it stopped convincing. That distinction is razor sharp.
It is.
It's like watching a master illusionist perform a magic trick. You are completely engaged, living in the wonder of the theater. You genuinely believe the woman on stage is floating in midair. It's working. The simulation magic is functioning perfectly.
Right.
Then suddenly, from your specific angle in the audience, the lighting shifts for a fraction of a second, and you notice the steel rod hidden behind the mirror under the table.
And what happens in that moment?
The trick itself didn't change. The props didn't change. The magician is doing the exact same motions he was doing 5 seconds ago when you were in absolute awe, but your perception fundamentally shifted.
You can never unsee the steel rod.
Exactly. You can never experience the wonder of the magic again. You just see the mechanics. You just see the pose.
And what remains when the illusion stops convincing isn't some grand, triumphant truth, as the Swiftie points out. What remains is a cold, clinical clarity.
You are left with the depressing clarity of how the trick worked. The snob, deeply unsettled by this, says, "That's not very comforting."
And the Swiftie replies, "Neither is the song."
It's such a great exchange. And while the snob and the Swiftie are having this visceral argument about magic and heartbreak, we have Professor Malek Merriwell providing this incredibly dense, jargon-heavy academic analysis in the background.
It reads as a hilarious, pompous satire at first, but if you actually translate his academic speak, it's incredibly profound.
Merriwell's analysis is the theoretical anchor of the dinner party. He talks about an irreversible process of hyper-real substitution and introduces a concept he calls proto-affective exhaustion.
Proto-affective exhaustion.
Okay, proto-affective exhaustion. That sounds like a diagnosis you'd get after spending too much time on a dating app. What is Merriwell actually saying there?
Merriwell is addressing the core of your earlier question. Why would we choose the fake opal over the real one?
Right.
He argues that maintaining absolute unfiltered authenticity, dealing with the real world and real human emotion is phenomenally exhausting.
It really is.
The real world is resistant, it is opaque, it is highly inconsistent. Loving a real, messy, deeply flawed human being who has their own trauma and unpredictable reactions takes a massive cognitive and emotional toll.
Oh, wow. So the simulation, the functional, highly performative version of love where everyone just hits their marks and says the right script, bypasses that emotional cost. It's frictionless.
Precisely. Merriwell is diagnosing modern society. He concludes that in this regime of hyperreality, the simulacrum does not merely replace the real as an inferior substitute, it optimizes it.
And in optimizing the experience to remove all the friction and pain, it renders the real, messy truth entirely unnecessary.
The fake is simply more comfortable, more predictable, and less exhausting than the real.
That is haunting. It's an absolute indictment of modern dating culture. We curate these flawless, optimized profiles. We engage in this highly scripted, witty text banter where we have time to edit our responses. We go on dates that feel like choreographed interviews.
Merriwell calls this operating under conditions of anticipatory validation.
We are so deeply exhausted by the messy, unpredictable reality of genuine, risky vulnerability, so we retreat into the optimized, safe simulation of a relationship.
And the tragic part is, it works. The opalite shines brilliantly in the curated lighting of the restaurant, until the exact moment it doesn't.
To really drive home the emotional devastation of that specific moment, the moment the trick stops working and you see the steel rod, the author takes us away from the noisy intellectual debate of the dinner table.
They pivot to a much quieter, starker scene. It's a vignette titled The Unlikely Taxi Ride.
It is an approximate hypothetical Uber ride occurring at exactly 2:11 a.m.,
The passengers are Taylor Swift and Jean Baudrillard.
which is just a surreal image.
The text notes the ride is precisely 9.2 kilometers long. The dialogue here is incredibly sparse, stripped of all Merriwell's academic jargon. It reads almost like a moody, independent cinematic screenplay.
The neon lights of the city reflect themselves endlessly in the wet windows, offering nothing but copies of copies.
It's so deeply evocative, you can picture the streetlights rhythmically passing over their faces in the dark. The silence in the car is heavy. Baudrillard is the one who breaks it. He asks her simply, "When did you see it?"
And Taylor replies, when it stopped making sense.
Baudrillard then confirms the philosophical core of the entire book with a single question. He asks, "Nothing changed." Taylor looks out the window and says, "Nothing."
Baudrillard replies, except you. She finally admits with total resignation, I saw the pose.
The dialogue just hangs there in the quiet of the car. Taylor says almost defensively, it felt real. Baudrillard tells her it was.
Because again, in a hyper-real world, functionality is reality. If it functioned as love, it was real love within the rules of the simulation.
But then she asks the heartbreaking question. So it wasn't a lie, just a performance. And he replies, a convincing one.
The vignette ends with a profound, terrifying realization. Taylor asks, and now? And as a traffic light turns green, illuminating the interior of the car, Baudrillard says, now you don't need it.
Wow.
I was struck by why the author, the mouse-colored cat, felt the need to include this specific, fictionalized scene. We already had the philosophy perfectly explained via the essay section. We had the debate via the dinner party. Why do we need the Uber ride?
Because philosophy, at its ultimate core, is meant to be lived, not just debated in a classroom.
Right.
By placing this high-minded, massive theory of simulacra into a deeply relatable, lonely, late-night human experience, the author strips away the protective armor of academic jargon.
Merriwell's hyper-real substitution is intellectually stimulating to discuss over wine, but sitting in the back of a taxi, shivering, realizing the person you love was just a projected performance, is emotionally devastating.
The Uber ride leaves only the visceral resonance of sudden clarity.
It grounds the entire intellectual exercise in raw humanity. And that grounding actually provides the perfect pivot to the final major section of the book.
Yes, the author finally steps out from behind the curtain in an afterword titled Antidote to Algorithmic Inbreeding.
And this is where they reveal how and why this entire bizarre, beautiful project was built in the first place.
The author is remarkably transparent about their methodology here. They reveal that this book and the synthesis of these wildly disparate ideas was created in direct collaboration with large language models.
AI. They used AI to write a book about philosophy and pop music.
Yes, but not in the lazy way we usually see. The author refers to these AI models as the stochastic parrots of infinity that read everything and understand absolutely nothing.
A stochastic parrot. That means it's just dealing in probabilities, right? It doesn't know what a heart is. It just knows that the word break statistically follows the word heart in the training data.
Precisely. It is a statistical engine, not a reasoning engine. But the author's afterword is not an apology for using AI. It is actually a manifesto.
They reframe the use of AI as the necessary affirmation of a new vital human role in the digital age. They call it the data sovereign.
And the author introduces this terrifying concept they call the paradox of infinite generation. They point out that when digital technology first emerged, like in the late 80s and 90s, the big utopian promise was zero generation loss.
If you made a digital copy of a file, the copy remained perfectly pristine. The fidelity was infinite.
We all remember the analog days. If you made a copy of a VHS tape and then a copy of that copy, it suffered from generation loss. By the fourth generation, the screen was just fuzzy static and warped audio.
Digital files promise to end that degradation.
But the author points out that today, with generative AI flooding the world, the danger is no longer the physical degradation of the visual or audio signal. The new danger is the degradation of meaning.
Because AI generates material purely by predicting the most statistically likely next word based on existing data, it constantly inevitably produces the mathematical average. It produces absolute conformity.
The author calls this phenomenon digital autophagy. Autophagy literally means self-eating. It is a system devouring itself.
Because as AI floods the internet with millions of pages of AI-generated content, future AI models will inevitably scrape and train on that newly generated content. It's a recursive, incestuous loop.
It's algorithmic inbreeding. Human thought gets smoother, safer, and infinitely more boring with each iteration. We are drowning in highly competent, grammatically perfect, completely unoriginal averageness.
The rough edges of human genius are being sanded down by probability math.
And this is exactly where the Opalite project becomes a defiant act of rebellion. The author's proposed solution to this digital autophagy is a concept they proudly call intellectual vandalism.
Intellectual vandalism. I absolutely love that phrase. The author says, we do not reject the digital photocopy, we overload it.
They introduce a philosophical approach called capacitivism.
The premise of capacitivism is that AI can organize existing information flawlessly, but it cannot dare. It cannot make an irrational conceptual leap.
Therefore, the human, the data sovereign, must inject deliberate friction into the circuit. We must introduce sparks that the system cannot possibly anticipate because there is no historical training data for it.
The text gives these incredible, surreal examples of what this friction looks like. The author says there is no training data for Wittgenstein in a slammed door.
Ludwig Wittgenstein famously argued that the meaning of language is derived entirely from its use in specific language games rather than some fixed dictionary definition.
So pairing his complex theories of linguistic utility with the violent, purely emotional, nonverbal communication of a slammed door is a conceptual collision the AI would never generate on its own.
Exactly. The author also mentions Deleuze in Lipstick.
Gilles Deleuze wrote about becoming and rhizomatic structures of identity, how we are constantly shifting multiplicities, not fixed subjects.
Applying Deleuzian fluidity to the performative, aesthetic act of applying lipstick is an act of intellectual vandalism. The algorithm, left to its own statistical devices, would never, ever pair the phenomenological dread of Jean Baudrillard with a pop song about a broken heart.
The cat has taken the color of the mouse, as the author writes. The human creator has entered the machine to forcefully steer the algorithm down unpredictable, weird, bumpy side roads.
The citizen of tomorrow isn't someone who passively consumes the perfectly curated, hyper-average feed. It's the person who actively bends the flow and disturbs its logic.
It is a profound manifesto for preserving human creativity in the age of artificial intelligence. It demands that we misbehave creatively.
Yeah.
We have to be the ghost in the machine.
And that manifesto brings us to the massive, jaw-dropping scope of what this mouse-colored cat has actually planned. Because Opalite is not just a standalone experimental booklet.
No, the text reveals that Opalite is merely one entry in a vast, sprawling collection the author calls the Philo Swift universe.
The author's overarching premise is wild. What if, from the very beginning of her career, Taylor Swift had hidden a massive, sprawling Easter egg across her entire discography, with each song containing a subtle, foundational reference to the central idea of great philosopher?
The author claims to have systematically identified nearly 200 of these correspondences. 200. And the index at the end of the book just lists them, and my mind was completely blown.
Let's look at a few of them. They pair the German philosopher Martin Heidegger with the 10-minute song All Too Well.
Heidegger is notoriously impossible to read. How does he connect to All Too Well?
Heidegger's masterwork is Being and Time, where he explores the concept of Dasein, which roughly translates to being there. He argues that humans are uniquely aware of our own mortality, our being towards death, and that we are essentially made of time.
We're constantly projecting into the future while being burdened by the past.
Right. All Too Well is fundamentally a thesis on the inescapable weight of memory and time, how the past, symbolized by a forgotten scarf, aggressively demands to exist in the present.
That is incredible. They also pair Niccolo Machiavelli, the ultimate cynical political strategist who wrote The Prince, with the song Getaway Car.
Machiavelli wrote about virtù and fortuna, the calculated, often ruthless ambition required to secure power and escape ruin.
The song Getaway Car explores the calculated utility of using one relationship purely as an exit strategy to escape another, fully accepting that the end justifies the means, even if it ends in betrayal. It's pure Machiavellian political theory applied to a love triangle.
Then we have Jacques Lacan, the French psychoanalyst, paired with blank space.
Lacan's theories revolve around the mirror stage and the concept of desire. He argued that human desire is always the desire of the other. We want what we think others want, and we are constantly chasing an unattainable object of desire.
Blank Space is a brilliant, self-aware masterclass in performing the exact neurotic, impossible expectations of the big other. The narrator is consciously playing the role of the hysterical, desiring subject that the media and the lover expect her to be.
And finally, they pair Hannah Arendt with champagne problems.
Arendt is famous for her phrase, the banality of evil, coined during the trial of Adolf Eichmann. She argued that immense destruction doesn't always come from sociopathic malice. It often comes from sheer thoughtlessness, the inability to think from the standpoint of somebody else.
While a rejected marriage proposal in Champagne Problems isn't a historical atrocity, the song captures the banality of personal devastation.
The narrator didn't act with malicious evil. She simply couldn't align her internal reality with the expectations of the moment. The devastation is profound, yet the cause is painfully banal.
I have to ask you, listening to this right now, which of these pairings makes you completely rethink the music you listen to? Does it make you want to go crack open Thomas Aquinas while listening to Cruel Summer on your commute?
The text is very careful to state that nothing is definitively proven here. The connections are tentative. The author writes that they are like a coat that's a little too big or an idea that's a little too small.
It's not meant to be literal, peer-reviewed academic thesis proving that Swift is secretly reading Heidegger. It is meant to build a fragile bridge between stadiums and libraries.
But I want to push back on that bridge for a second.
Okay, go for it.
By proving that these deep philosophical themes, existentialism, hyperreality, the social contract, the banality of evil, are ubiquitous in massive pop culture hits, do we democratize philosophy, or do we accidentally prove that philosophy is basically just human common sense dressed up in fancy, impenetrable words?
If a teenager crying over a breakup in her bedroom is naturally experiencing the exact same insights it took Søren Kierkegaard entire volumes to articulate, doesn't that render the academic texts a bit redundant?
That is the ultimate tension of the entire project, and perhaps its greatest insight. The mouse-colored cat would argue that they desperately need each other.
The pop song provides the visceral, undeniable, lived experience of the truth. It provides the heat.
The philosophical text provides the structural blueprint of why it burns. Common sense is the realization that the stove is hot. Philosophy is understanding the laws of thermodynamics.
We shouldn't have to choose between feeling and understanding. The author is simply demanding that we be allowed to study both at the exact same time without shame.
What an incredible intellectual ride.
Right.
We've gone from Pierre Bourdieu exposing the cultural snobbery of the academic elite all the way to Jean Baudrillard's hyperreality, using an artificial opal to understand why we accept highly functioning performances of love.
We've explored the devastation of the 2.11 a.m. taxi ride when the magic trick shatters, and we've ended with a radical manifesto for human vandalism in the face of AI-generated conformity.
It is a masterful, rebellious piece of work. But as we bring this deep dive to a close, we want to turn the lens back onto your own life.
Where are you accepting a functional performance? Because the real thing is simply too exhausting to navigate. Where are the simulacra hiding in your daily routines? Are you actually living your life, or are you executing a highly convincing, frictionless simulation of one?
It's the challenge Professor Merriwell laid out. Are you suffering from proto-affective exhaustion? Have you opted for the optimized, curated copy because the messy reality requires too much genuine vulnerability?
We all do it to some extent. The question is whether we realize we are doing it.
And I want to leave you with one final lingering thought.
We talked extensively today about the pain and the sharp clarity of realizing it was just a pose. That taxi ride moment when the simulacrum stops working, the mirror shifts, and the illusion shatters.
But consider where a digital world is heading right now.
With AI, virtual realities, and hyper-curated online existences getting more and more flawless by the day, is there a future where the simulation becomes so perfectly, seamlessly optimized that we completely lose the desire to ever see the pose?
A world where we stop looking for the mirror entirely.
Exactly. What happens to humanity when we collectively decide that the comfortable, frictionless functioning illusion is actually vastly superior to the messy, resistant truth?
It's the ultimate Baudrillardian nightmare. Or, depending on how exhausted you are by reality, perhaps it's a new kind of peace.
When the X-ray machine is broken and reality is just static, sometimes the only thing left to do is sit back and admire the artificial glow.